Before we get started, please make sure that you have this note sheet as well as this note sheet glued into your math notebook so that you can follow along as the video goes. Today we're going to be comparing decimals, and it's really important when we look at decimals that we look at each place value separately so that we can compare. We oftentimes use money to help us compare decimals. So when we talk about looking at each place value, we're talking about looking at the difference between dollars, dimes, and pennies in this particular case. So the first thing that we want to do when we compare decimals is use any of the following strategies we're about to talk about. One of which is we can line up our decimals so that we line up the wholes, the tenths, and the hundredths. So I'm also gonna 1 and 52 hundredths. When we do that, we can then look at each place value. So for example, in this one, both of these two numbers have a 1 in the ones place. So we cannot differentiate which one is greater than or less than based on the ones place. However, when I get to the tenths place, I can see that this number has a 2, meaning that there are 2 tenths in this place. If we were talking money, this would be the same as 2 dimes. And this one has a 5. So again, this would be the same as 5 dimes, but it is 5 tenths. I can look at this place value alone to determine that 1 and 52 hundredths is greater than 1 and 25 hundredths. So we write the less than sign here. 1 and 25 hundredths is less than 1 and 52 hundredths. However, I'm also going to shade just to be sure or to show you that there's also other ways that we can compare. So I'm going to shade in my 1 whole. When shading, it's really important to make sure you have it all shaded in so that there's no discrepancy between whether that's 1 whole or not. And then I have 2 tenths. Remember, the tenths are the whole row. And then I have 5 hundredths. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm going to shade 1 and 52 hundredths on this side. So again, I'm going to shade 1 whole. And then I need 5 tenths. And I need 2 hundredths. And clearly, again, we can see that 1 and 52 hundredths is greater than 1 and 25 hundredths. Or the way this is read is 1 and 25 hundredths is less than 1 and 52 hundredths. At the bottom of your note sheet, we are going to compare the numbers 47 and 824 thousandths and 47 and 842 thousandths. So for these down here, we're just actually going to line them up because it takes a little bit less time. So we're going to do 47 and 824 and 47 and 842. And again, we're going to actually start all the way over to our greatest place value, in this case the tens, and the 4s are the same, so we can't determine. The 7s are the same, so we can't determine. The tenths place is the same, those 8s are the same. And then we get to this place value, our hundredths place. We have a difference of a 2 in the first number and a 4 in the second one. So because the 4 is greater, then 47 and 824 thousandths is less than 47 and 842 thousandths. Same thing here below. We're going to line them up. It's so important to make sure that the decimal places are lined up exactly so that you can compare. We're going to go through and check all our place values. Tens are the same, ones are the same, tenths are the same. In this case, the hundredths are the same, and the 3 is bigger. So we have 32 and 732 thousandths is greater than 32 and 723 thousandths. All right. Now, the next page in your notes looks like this. And there really isn't anything for you to fill in, but it really just talks about what we just did in order to compare decimals. So you should have a little bit of room on your page to write in some of the examples that we're about to do. So I would like for you to write in 1 4/10, and we're going to compare, so you can, if you want to draw the circle, you can. And let's compare it to 1 400. Now, you may be thinking, well, you just said it, that's so much easier. 1 4/10 is greater than 1 400. But we're going to go ahead and line them up just like we did in the last one. If you want the boxes, you can have the boxes. If you don't, you can just line them up one on top of each other. And if you want to fill in a 0 here, you can. And then it's easy for us to see that this is, if we're talking money, $1.40, and this one is $1.04. $1.40 is more than $1.04. But again, it's really important that we focus on the place value. Our ones place is the same, but in our tenths place, we have a 4. So 1 4/10 is greater than 1 400. All right, so let's look at another one. What if we have something like this? Now this one we cannot use. Lost the camera there, sorry guys. This one we cannot use money because our money system doesn't go out to the thousandths place. So we're just going to have to rely on lining up our decimals and looking at each place value separately. So we have 1 6300, and then I have 1 632 thousandths. I can add this 0 in, and again, even though it's not money, we can see that this is 1 630 thousandths, and this is 1 632. So 1 6300 is less than 1 632 thousandths. No matter what the numbers are, you always line them up to determine which one is greater than or less than. The same would go if we were ordering decimals. You would want to do the same thing. So if you had a bunch of decimals that we wanted to put in order, so let's say we have 2 3/10, 2 41/100, 1 68/100, 2 33/100, and 1 8/10. In order to place these numbers in order, again, we're going to line up the decimals. So I'm going to use just a different color to line them all up so we can see better. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at our ones place. And if I want to do, let's say we're going to do this least to greatest, that way we're not confused. So the smallest number here is going to be one of these two numbers. So now I'm really looking at my 1 68/100 and my 1 8/10 to determine which one is going to be smaller. And I can add that 0 in.
Staff, we still need 2 cars to be moved behind the yellow line in our back 5-6 parking lot and our back Mason Intermediate parking lot.
All right.
There is a Chevy
We'll keep
Cobalt,
talking over
light
her.
Chevy
So
Cobalt,
in this case, the 6 in our tens place is smaller than the 8. So 1 and 6800ths is going to come first because it's smaller. Then it's going to be 1 and 8/10. So now I have these two numbers crossed off, and I'm only focusing on the next 3. So now I'm going to take those. They have the same whole numbers. So I'm going to look at 2 and 3/10, 2 and 4100ths, and 2 and 3300ths. So of these, now I'm putting these in order, and I get the whole numbers are the same. And I look here, and I have these 2 tenths are the same, so I really just need to compare these two. And I can see that this one is 2 and 30/100ths, and this one is 2 and 33/100ths. So 2 and 30/100ths would come first, then 2 and 33/100ths, and then finally we would have 2 and 41/100ths. Remember that we can always add a 0 at the end of a decimal, and it doesn't change the value. 1 and 8/10ths is the same as 1 and 80/100ths. If you have 8 dimes, it's the same value as 80 pennies, and that's all that really says. Again, so important when comparing decimals or ordering decimals that we have to line them up and look at each place value separately. Once you've completed your notes and you think you understand, you may begin working on your practice or checkpoints.